24 Carat Buddha and Other Fables, Stories of Self-Discovery by Maxine Harris, published by the Sidran Institute Press of Baltimore, Maryland. The 24 Carat Buddha. The streets of Bangkok are filled with merchants selling all kinds of counterfeit goods. On one corner, you can purchase Gucci handbags. On another, 24-carat diamond and gold Rolex watches. And on the next, the latest Nike running shoes. The Tourist Bureau warns travelers to avoid these copycat items. Most are made locally of poor quality material. Some are actually legitimate, albeit stolen. And some merely boast a glued-on logo, likely to fall off before the traveler returns home. Despite these warnings and knowledge that they are purchasing counterfeit merchandise, most travelers cannot resist at least one bargain. After all, where can you buy an Armani jacket for $20, even if it is fake? The summer months are among the busiest for tourism in Thailand, and one hot August afternoon found 3 young Americans among the thousands who crowded the temples and the local spice and silk markets. "I can't walk another step," groaned Celia. "Me either," echoed her companion Jean. "I can't believe the two of you. We are in one of the most exotic cities in the world, and you want to rest. Where's your sense of adventure?" "I think I left it in the last temple we visited." "Well, the two of you can go back to the hotel, but I'm going to explore more of the city." Rachel was determined not to miss one moment of the trip that she and her 2 friends had spent months planning. After a bit more chatter, the 3 friends decided to split up for a few hours. Jean and Celia would go back to the hotel, and Rachel would wander on her own. In 3 hours, they would meet for tea at one of the city's floating tea houses. Rachel had heard about a royal barge that had belonged to the king, and she set off to find it. As she wandered the streets, one of the local vendors began to follow her and call out, Miss, over here. I have a wonderful watch, very cheap." At first, Rachel just ignored the man, but as he persisted, she became annoyed. She turned and faced the merchant. "I may be a tourist, but I am not stupid. I know those watches are fake." "Oh, forgive me, ma'am. You are quite right. These watches are nothing but cheap imitations." Rachel was stunned. Here was a merchant admitting that his wares were fakes. She was so intrigued by his acknowledgement that she stopped for a moment to talk. The merchant shared with her his experience selling to the naive tourist and reminisced about the days when his family owned a small antique shop. "I still have some wonderful treasures from my family's personal collection, if you'd like to take a look." Intrigued by the prospect of seeing the more personal side of the country, Rachel followed along beside her new acquaintance. The two wandered through a maze of shops, past several purveyors of watches and handbags, until they came to a small storefront. "Just this way," pointed the merchant. "Please excuse the mess, but I rarely bring visitors here anymore." Rachel was impressed by the small shop, and that even smelled old and seemed to hold all sorts of treasures. At first, she just looked around, taking in as much as she could and anticipating the reaction of her friends when she told them of her adventure. I know I shouldn't even show you any of the relics I have here, because some of them are genuine antiques and therefore difficult to take out of the country. But you seem so interested in what I have here." The merchant then proceeded to remove a small jade Buddha from a dusty case. "This little gem is one of my favorites. I still have the papers certifying it as an authentic antique. Please have a look." Rachel took the small object in her hand. It felt so cool and smooth. The little Buddha had a most peaceful smile on his round face. How wonderful! This is just the sort of souvenir I would love to bring home, but I am sure it is much too expensive. You are probably right, said the merchant. And besides, I am not sure that I could part with this piece. You see, it was one of my first purchases when I began working with my father. The two talked a while longer, and then Rachel mustered the courage to make an offer for the jade Buddha. I understand that the statue is quite rare, but I would be willing to pay $500 for something so unique. Rachel had done the calculations in her mind and figured that if she watched her pennies for the rest of the trip, she could just afford the jade statue and still have enough to get back to her apartment in Seattle. The merchant and the tourist continued to talk and haggle for almost another hour, but in the end, Rachel left the shop with the small treasure safely wrapped in her backpack. It was now almost time to meet her friends, and Rachel could not wait to tell them of her adventure and her wonderful purchase. In the tea room, the three friends huddled over a small table, a large plate of scones and breads, as Rachel began to tell her story. She told of her adventures in great detail, beginning with her curious meeting with the merchant on the street, and concluding with her successful purchase of the antique Buddha. Satisfied with her story, Rachel leaned back and waited for her friends to respond. But the response was far from what she anticipated. After glancing at one another, they both looked away, fumbling with their teacups. "Well?" asked Rachel, growing somewhat uncomfortable. Celia looked down, her face flushed. She appeared to be suppressing an embarrassed laugh. Jean broke the silence. "Do you realize that you just bought a genuine antique Buddha from a man who was selling fake 24-karat Rolex watches? It's a wonder he didn't try to tell you it was a Rolex Buddha."